I'm 75 today, right? Tommy's gone. Leonardo Webster's gone. A few other of my teammates are gone, and it just keeps on going and going. So to have an opportunity like this, Adam, to talk to you and share, yeah, I know I run my mouth, but I have a good memory because people go, how do you remember this stuff, Rich? I said, man, what do you mean? I said, it's my life. It was my life. It got me a college education. It got me money when I played in the NBA for 3 years. And so, yeah, I remember it. Most of it. I'm not going to say all of it. Some of it I'd like to forget, but you got to take the good with the bad.
Then you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So we're all getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass, yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 137. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Rich Rinaldi to the show. This is part one of our extended conversation about his life. We recorded this on Rich's 75th birthday, which was an added treat. It's a wide-ranging discussion and a perfect example of why I love creating my podcast. We talk baseball, Rich's first sporting love, and what led to his switch to basketball at the age of 14. He became a hoops standout in high school and a star in college amid the real possibility of being drafted for military service in the Vietnam War. Part one of our chat covers through early 1971, just before the ABA and NBA drafts were held in March. Keep an ear out for part two, where we'll delve into Rich's pro career, the NBA, ABA, and overseas. Towards the end of the show, I have a great podcast review to share and thank a listener who sent a kind and thoughtful text message via the link in my show notes. Speaking of, show notes for this episode and access to a huge archive of past episodes are available at inallairness.com. Now, on to the show. My guest today had an uncommon professional basketball career. After a stellar tenure at St. Peter's College in New Jersey, he played 3 seasons in the NBA and 1 in the ABA before moving overseas, where he enjoyed 6 seasons as a pro in Europe. He's also celebrating his 75th birthday today as we record this, so that's extra special. Rich Rinaldi, thank you very much for joining me.
Good to be here. Thank you, Adam.
Researching for today's conversation, I've read countless city of Poughkeepsie and the neighbouring town of Poughkeepsie mentions. They're often referred to as a single place. It's about 80 miles north of New York City. And you were born in Poughkeepsie. How would you describe it, Rich?
Poughkeepsie is different. The first 17 years of my life, I lived there, and then I was off to college. I grew up in a predominant, I'd say 95% Italian section of downtown Poughkeepsie. Everyone knew each other, and we all went to the Italian elementary school, and then there was the Irish elementary school. It was just divided into groups. I didn't give it much thought. I just wanted to play baseball. That was it. Nothing else mattered, man.
I read that baseball was your first love, and you threw a no-hitter in the 1962 Little League playoffs. And if I'm not mistaken, your Poughkeepsie team were that year's champs. What are maybe a few of your fondest memories from the baseball diamond, Rich?
Winning the city championship, 12-year-old I was, and that was your last year you can play Little League before you moved on to Junior League. There were many, many good baseball players because we didn't have computers. We were always outdoors, moving around, and it was pretty competitive, and we all got very good at the game. To me, that was the highlight, finally winning, because the year before we went to the finals and lost. I just loved playing baseball and competing.
Who were some of the players that you looked up to as far as major leaguers back in that time?
I had three guys that to this day I knew batting averages and sometimes birthdays, and I was just immersed into Major League Baseball. And I would keep score at home. Like if the Dodgers were playing, they were my favorite team, the Brooklyn Dodgers. But the three players to me, these were guys that wowed me. I tried to emulate them. First one was Tommy Davis. He was the batting champ for the Dodgers. I tried to imitate his stance. He choked up a little bit on the bat. He led the league in hitting a few times. I think he had 150 RBIs. He was just really cool. I like Tommy Davis, who went to Boys High in Brooklyn. I didn't know that until I got older. There's another guy named Ron Hunt that was just a gritty old second baseman, an all-star. I imitated his batting stance. I don't know how familiar you are with baseball, but there was a lot of subtle disrespect back then. There was no hugging and stuff. They didn't like the way you carried yourself. You were going to get a fastball under your chin. Ron Hunt did this little thing when he was on the first base dugout. I don't know how I'm getting to these stories, but I'd say 9 out of 10 batters would walk behind the catcher and the umpire toward the plate and then come back to the batter's box where a right-handed batter would be. Ron Hunt just walked right in front of the catcher. Not saying excuse me or anything. I'm just here to play hardball and we're going to get dirty. There's no protocol. So I got Ron Hunt, I got Tommy Davis, and Sandy Koufax was just beyond belief to me. I used to eat, sleep, and drink the Dodgers. When they lost, I'd get depressed. My mother would keep me home from school. It's okay, Richard, but I kind of grew up. Everything's different now. Basketball is different than, as you said, 75 years old. Some of the professionals in all the major sports in America had to work jobs in the off season. Just fast forward to the Bullets. When I was there with them, I was up against a 33-year-old guy. His name was Eddie Miles, and they called him the man with the golden arm. And he could shoot the heck out of the ball. I know he didn't like me because I was there to take his job. And in practice, 4 months before, I was playing against college kids. And here I am against this 33, 34-year-old man just pounding the shit out of me. I mean, just, forearm smashes as I tried to drive. Without the ball, I was going to set a pick or something. And he just kept pounding me. It was survival.
What was the impetus for making the switch to start playing hoops?
I know exactly what happened. I moved from the city of Poughkeepsie to the town of Poughkeepsie. And the town of Poughkeepsie was in the Roosevelt High School Hyde Park district. Hyde Park, the town north of Poughkeepsie. And it was the summer home of President Franklin Roosevelt. So it was FDR High School. I left all my city of Poughkeepsie baseball friends and went to a basketball-loving area. Basketball was predominant in the city of Poughkeepsie. Baseball, to me, was predominant. That's how I saw it. So I tried to fit in. I never touched a basketball until I was 14 years old. I had to ask my older brother what a field goal was. Field goal to me was 3 points in football. He sat me down and said, "No, Richard, no, a field goal is a basket when you make a basket." There was no 3-point shot back then, but it was a 2-point basket. So with my new friends, I tried out for the freshman team in high school, and I got cut. I was one of the last ones to get cut. And so I kind of took it personal and just kept practicing. I went to a game. I watched my friends, the team I got cut on, the freshman team, and I saw that they had to wear tank tops and tight shorts. And I was 5'6", 124. And girls were in the freaking gym. All right. And I go, wait, man, I'm kind of glad I got cut. I got to fill out a little bit. I look like a scarecrow, man, or a freaking coat hanger. I got better over the summer, and I just kept playing and did well on the JV team and really good as a junior on the varsity and a lot of accolades as a senior. The scoring average kept going up. The team's win production kept going up. We were real competitive. We had a good team.
Now, I read that as a high school senior, on the 20th of January of 1967, your Roosevelt presidents ended the Beacon Bulldogs' 53-game win streak, and they were the winners of 4 straight championships in the Dutchess County Scholastic League, DCSL. And per the Poughkeepsie Journal, you scored 24 points in the upset of the season. Fans were swarming the court and they carried you on their shoulders. A photo from that paper shows that you were cutting down the net. Does that particular game reside in the memory banks there, Rich?
It was voted by a couple generations the greatest game ever played in Dutchess County.
Well,
yeah, I had 24, and I remember 10 for 10 from the foul line. And the 3 times we played them previous, I would get 30, always 30, 36, 31, and we just come up short. This time, I had 24. Our big guy was 6'2". He had 17 rebounds, and that was a big thing. We had balanced scoring, and we beat the Beacon Bulldogs. They ended up being the champs. We finished 1 game behind them in the standings at the end of the year, but they had a player named Gary McCrae. He was real good. Everybody had to be prepared for Gary McCrae, but we got his ass up at our gym. And we still talk to this day, Gary Goose McCrae. This is a modern day, what they call shout out to Goose.
About a month after that particular game, you torched Wappingers with 44 points and you set a then single game scoring mark. It was the 3rd time the record was broken by a player in that season. And about a week or so later, I read that that record was then broken again with a 53-point effort by another guy. Per the Poughkeepsie Journal's unofficial statistics, you were the Central Section's scoring champ in 1967. The Bulldogs, as you said, they won their 5th straight title, and your squad was second at 12-2 behind their 13-1. You saved one of your best high school performances for the Section 1 Class A tournament. You had 46 points in a 92-80 loss versus Peekskill. You were a unanimous all-DCSL first-team selection, and by virtue of that tournament scoring, you averaged more than 27 points a game in high school. So all that said, what particularly stands out from your time there at FDR High School, Rich?
What stands out? I just kept improving. I wanted to improve, and we had a coach that let us run, let us play ball. We were disciplined, but we were also free to create in a game that needs a free flow and adjustment to any situation. High school was where I just kept getting better, and I never stopped, man. I played at the parks all summer. I'd get somebody with a car and drive to another court where the action was, and then to another court where the action was, and you find the best players in the county, and you go see what you got. You might as well go find the best.
Did you pattern your game after anyone in particular?
No, but I did watch people, observe. Let me try that move. Let me try this. I don't remember any names of players, but the NBA was on ABC once a week on Sunday afternoon. I'd watch that game. Normally the Celtics against the Sixers or Elgin Baylor and the Lakers were on. And after the game, I would walk down with my best friend down the hill to Marist College, where Rick Smits played 20-some years after. It was just a little gym then. I would go down there and work on the moves because it was wintertime. There was a defining moment in my high school career. Man, I don't know if it was junior to senior year or senior to college, but the area in my high school had a player. His name was Wes Bialasuknia. And anybody that's listening to this that played ball at UConn, at the University of Connecticut, they seen his name up on the wall because Wes was a legend there for a long, long time. And the same goes with one of my high school teammates, Greg Coles. Anybody goes up to Syracuse, he's one of the top 25 players up at Syracuse. That's 2 major schools right there that came out of Roosevelt High School. West Balasuknia, we were playing at a place called Fairview Park. I lived in the Fairview area. That was Roosevelt High School's like legendary park where people played all summer long, 11 o'clock at night. Neighbors were pissed off because the ball was dribbling at 11 and they were trying to sleep. And now that I'm older, I understand it. I didn't give a rat's ass back then. I just had to get better. It was my way out of the ghetto. We didn't have much growing up. So there's one night Balasuknia was there and he was 4 years older. And we did some real battle. He was an All-American. He was this, he was that. You can look him up, Wes Bialyasukian. He passed about 10 years ago. Wow, our guy. The Hawks drafted him in the NBA, and the Oakland Oaks drafted him in the ABA. He had the record. That got demolished as time went on. He had 8 straight three-point field goals way back in 68. So it was pretty impressive. So he and I did battle that night. I held my own. And I said, well, man, if I can do this against Wes, I'm going to keep doing this. As long as I didn't get drafted to go to Vietnam, everything was going to be okay.
Don't want to detour too much, but how did that impact you with either, could be family, could be just friends or teammates, acquaintances that actually were drafted, and the impact it would have on them going forwards or altering the course of their life? What do you think about that?
I had a lot of guys that went and never came back. You know, they came back in a box. The only way I wasn't thinking about it was being on the basketball court and cracking that first sweat and being competitive. Everything else disappeared because you were in that little box of basketball. Vietnam was on your mind all the time. It was omnipresent. Like if you went to college, you were okay. You didn't have to go to Vietnam. You were classified 1Y. 1A, you were going. 4F, you had a physical disability. There was a night, and I'll fast forward with you to put high school in the back and go to college on December 1st of 1969. There's a fancy-ass name for it, but I call it the draft lottery. They did military something or other. They had this lottery. I knew nothing about it because on December 1st of 1969, we were to have our first opening game my junior year, and I didn't think or care about anything else other than kicking Loyola's ass in Jersey City. That's exactly what happened. And the next day at practice, and you ask me about friends or family in Vietnam, I don't think anybody can absorb what it was like all these years later and the world the way it is now. But Vietnam was frightening. So I come to practice the next day and they say, hey, Rinaldi, when's your birthday? And I said, why? What do you care? What are you guys going to have a cake for me or something? We roughed it up a little with the language. So I told them, and they go, wouldn't you know it? My number was high. Now, I'll explain this one thing for listeners that don't know. This draft lottery, they put 366 balls in a bin. And it was like playing bingo or lotto or something, right? And there was a birthday on each of these balls. And any ball came up with your birthday on from number 1 to 120, you were getting drafted. Unless you went to Canada or you became a conscientious objector, or 121 to 240, you see how it's divided in basically thirds. 240, not so much. 241 to 366, you didn't have to go. And I ended up with number 261. And I didn't have to go. And when the Bullets drafted me, they knew my number, but they hired a lawyer to call my draft board, and they wanted to see it in writing that Rich Rinaldi was number 261, and there's no way he's going to get drafted. And that practice that day, the guys with number 60 and 10, you threw a pass to him and hit him right in the head. And these were Division I ball players. Do not exaggerate. I'm telling you what happened, and it was frightening. I felt badly for the other guys, but I was kind of saved. And that was my junior year.
I appreciate you sharing it. I can't even begin to imagine how that was at the time, and I won't even pretend to understand how terrible it had impacts still to this day.
Let me just say this also, and I'll finish with this in Vietnam. I liken it to this. It's an away game, right? You're going to their jungle in the rice paddies, and you're 18 years old, you're 19 years old. You were at the senior prom the year before and playing high school basketball or whatever you were doing. And now all of a sudden you're drafted. or you're 22 years old after college, you're drafted. And you're in the jungle. I don't want to use the name we use for those North Vietnamese, so I'll be politically correct here. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but Americans would smoke cigarettes, and they knew their opposition, knew their home field very well. They knew where the Americans were. So it was just like a suicide mission for the most part. In summation, 60,000 Americans died over the course of, I think it was since 1954 it started, when the French didn't want anything to do with it. So America took it over, but it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And I was scared for my younger brother, and he got a halfway decent number and he didn't have to go. And then we started to de-escalate and we lost. We lost the war. That rarely happened, but it happened. One of my best friends had an M60 and he was up in a tree, popping away at anything that moved in the opposition. And he rarely ever talked about it, but lately he has been talking about it. And I see him now and then. He never, ever, ever, ever talked about it. Now he's my age, so he's winding this game of life down, as happens if you make it this far. Let's carry on.
Can't even imagine. I've seen it recreated countless times on movies and TV shows, and of course that doesn't even do it justice. Frightening, as you say, to put it into context. Thank you for that quick deviation there, and we'll try and move back to some more happier times, certainly in your life. What was the decision making to actually sign on the dotted line to join St. Peter's?
It was like an extended league of the Winter League, the high school league. And all of a sudden we just milled and conglomerated to each little clique. And we played ball, and it was like really, really competitive. But the one thing about this, I had to make a decision now. I grew up 6 of us, 3 in each bedroom. We had nothing, really. We had our pasta. We were down in that Italian section, and all 4 of my grandparents were from Italy. So I fit that mold. What happened was I made a decision that I was going to go to college, and basketball was going to pay for college. And say if I played a game at 6 o'clock up in Hyde Park in the Hyde Park Summer League, Barney's Bears, I'd borrow my mom's station wagon and drive to the game. And my baseball uniform was in the back seat because we had a game at 7:30 under the lights, I don't know, 8 miles away. I was going back and forth all summer doing that. And I looked at the manager, and this was the defining moment for me. I said, Mr. Gordon, I can't do this anymore. I got to give all my love and time and energy to basketball because it's going to pay my education. So I hung him up at 17 and pursued basketball in college.
What appealed to you most about St. Peter's College in Jersey City?
They were one of the few schools that accepted me academically. My grades weren't that good, and back then college was college. It was a Jesuit school, and they were really tough, and I couldn't get into a lot of other schools. The thing at St. Peter's, they didn't accept me until the second trimester. I had to prove myself academically. I had to go to night school and had to pay for night school. I wasn't with the team for the first month. They said, well, you need a 3.0 to get into day school. And I got a 2.67, and they saw me play for 2 months. So they said, 2.67 is good enough. We'll bring you on. We like the way you play.
On the St. Peter's freshman team, you averaged better than 16 points, 4 assists, and over 9 boards a game. And I read that you played in 20 of the team's 23 games. You went 14-9, so impressive numbers there for yourself personally. How did you find the transition?
You were playing against scholarship guys. Their schooling was taken care of, the room and board and all that. And so they were good. They weren't just like a high school player. The first game I played was at West Point. And these West Point guys, they did more than we would do in a whole day by 7 in the morning. It was fun just pounding them, and they were pounding me. I enjoyed that. Just to give you an idea of freshman ball, people out there that know basketball, this is, I'm not going to say ancient history, but it was 1967-68 season. St. Peter's would play Villanova every year. And Howard Porter was the man. And I played against Howard Porter for 4 years, kicked our ass for 4 years. But I got mine. He just dominated, and they had a hell of a team. We had a pretty good team, too. We weren't as good as Villanova. I would say the highlight of our freshman season was in February. There was a doubleheader in the Jersey City Armory. We played Villanova in the Armory at the freshman game. In high school, you call it the JV game, but there were freshman teams back then because freshmen couldn't play on the varsity. The headline game was St. Peter's against Niagara and Calvin Murphy. St. Peter's was 22-2 that year before the NIT, and one of the losses was to Calvin Murphy, who had 50 points. At the time was the Jersey City Armory record. That was pretty cool, playing in that game as a freshman, 18 years old, and the crowd is coming in, and there were 7,000 people in the gym. You keep getting better, improving. The level of competition's going up. I just kept playing. That's all I wanted to do was play. Didn't want to talk about shit like now I'm talking, I'm running my mouth. And I used to put this energy onto the court and not really care about too much.
You can tell your passion in the voice. It's really great to hear. St. Peter's varsity team was a semi-finalist in 1968 in the National Invitational Tournament, the NIT, at Madison Square Garden. Dayton were the champions and Kansas was runner-up. I imagine you would have been a keen observer of the Peacocks' run in that 1968 NIT.
The freshman team would practice a lot against that team. That's the team I said was 22-2. Mm-hmm. They ended up being 24-4 because they won the first 2 games of the NIT. There were 16 teams in the NIT back then, and all the games were played at Madison Square Garden. The NCAA had, I think, 29 teams. It wasn't diluted. That team, we'd play against them a lot during the season, and that would improve your game as well. Yeah, I was a keen observer, man. We would just jump on a subway from Jersey City, and it would come right to 33rd Street. It'd take maybe 20 minutes, a half an hour. You drop a token or you jump the turnstile if you didn't have the 30 cents, whatever it was, to get over there, and you run fast. The first game was against Marshall, Dan D'Antoni. I think it was the first game. And it was a double overtime game, and the starting team was Elnardo Webster. And he had 51 points in the NIT. He was a beast. He was only a junior. The whole college, Jersey City, oh, man, everybody's like, wow. And the next game was against Duke. All them Duke Blue Devils, man. And their coach was Vic Bubas. They asked him about St. Peter's. And he goes, yeah, that's a church, isn't it? That was like locker room material. At the end of the game, St. Peter's had 100 and Duke had 71. 100-71, we kicked their ass. Everything was going good. Now we're in the semifinals, and here comes Joe White. And that was the end of that run. 100 points here, 100 points there. Final score, 58-46. JoJo controlled that game. They used to play consolation games back then. Notre Dame beat us 81-78. And then that team graduated, and I came up as a sophomore.
Your Madison Square Garden debut was versus Fairfield University on February 22 of 1969. And I read that you blocked a crucial shot with 9 seconds left, which preserved an overtime win, 82-80. Madison Square Garden, in its current location, opened the year prior to this game, if my research is correct. How did it feel to play hoops at the famed Madison Square Garden?
It's incredible. St. Peter's, its proximity to Madison Square Garden, we played a lot of games there. Not as many as Manhattan and St. John's, but we played a number of games there, and it was just another big gym. It was a bigger gym than the gyms I was used to playing in. Any basketball player will tell you, at least I would think, is that once you crack that first sweat and have that good warm-up and somebody says or does something to piss you off, you take on a whole nother persona. The smile goes away because it takes up too much energy. There ain't no smiling when you're balling. Today's a little different. Everybody's hugging each other, taking days off and shit like that. But there were 200 guys in the league when I played. 200. And now, God, there's like over 500. It's all been written. And yeah, I got to play at the Garden a lot in college, even some as a pro. Not as many as I would have liked because we'll get to that.
As a sophomore, your Peacocks went 21-7, and you were the team's third leading scorer with 12.4 points a game in about 25 minutes a contest. Per Basketball Reference, you had 5 games of 20 or more points, and you had a season-high 23 against St. Francis. St. Peter's were the MCC, or Metropolitan Collegiate Conference, regular season champs, and you took part in the 1969 NIT at Madison Square Garden. What stands out perhaps from that first varsity season there, Rich?
What stands out is I started, but I didn't finish. I didn't understand it, but I kept my mouth shut. Here's something. This is a good story. Now, Leonardo Webster was the star of the team. He was a senior. I was a sophomore. He knew I could fill it up and shoot the ball and run and do this. And here he is coming off of a junior year that was really good. And he had the 51 points in the NIT against Marshall. He takes me off to the side, right, one-on-one. He's like 22. I'm 19. And he says to me, Rich, come here, man. We got to have a little talk here. I said, what's up, Webb? He goes, your time's going to come, but it's not now. And this is how you're going to get me the ball. You know, if the guy's arms are up like this, you're going to throw a bounce pass. If they're down, you're going to throw a lob pass into the post. Understand that this is my time. I said, sure, Webb. That's fine. What am I going to say? That's what we did. I really enjoyed Webster. He was a treat.
He led the Peacocks with 24.1 points a game in that sophomore season of yours, and he was selected in the 1969 NBA draft. However, ultimately played 24 games in the ABA's 1972 season. I've heard you talk lovingly of him in the past.
Yeah.
Had a great impact on you as well throughout your collegiate time there too. I actually read that you missed 2 games in your sophomore season, one with the flu and the other one due to concussion. What led to the concussion, if you don't mind my asking?
It was the game that you mentioned at St. Francis where I had 23 points as a sophomore. I was going really good that game. St. Francis of Loretto, Pennsylvania. There was a big stud, man. His name was Larry Lewis. He was like 6'7". He and Webster were going at it all game, and it was great. I got to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and man, I got clocked with a Larry Lewis elbow that put me down. The headlines were, Rinaldi lost for the season. I said, no, that ain't going to happen. Concussion's not going to make me any smarter or any dumber than I already am. So I'm playing. I'm not lost for the season. So I was in a hospital, and they didn't play me the next game, which happened to be on WPIX Channel 11 in New York. And it was the same day that Joe Willie Namath, the Jets, won the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Colts. I think it was January 12th. That was the concussion and the flu. I was sick. I went with the team. We went to Huntington, West Virginia, and we played Marshall. And I just sat in street clothes, which I didn't like.
As a junior, your Peacocks went 13-11, and the 1970 team still holds the record for most points in a single game with 137, incredibly, a 25-point win against Manhattan. And then that same season, your team set another record that still stands. It's the largest winning margin, 68 points versus Biscayne.
Yeah, they're in North Miami.
108-46 route. Records that still stand to this day.
That 137 game, it was at Cardinal Spellman High School. We played Manhattan every year, and we beat Manhattan every year. Some games were close. This one wasn't. A kid named Tommy Schwester broke Webster's record with 53 points that night.
Wow.
He had 53 points. And I can remember I was sick as a dog. I had the flu, but I wasn't going to sit out. I didn't tell anybody I was sick. So I just like kept getting him the ball. Here, Tommy, keep firing and firing and firing. And he had 53 points. And the sad part about this is, I'm 75 today, right? Tommy's gone. Leonardo Webster's gone. A few other of my teammates are gone, and it just keeps on going and going. So to have an opportunity like this, Adam, to talk to you and share, I know I run my mouth, but I have a good memory because people go, how do you remember this stuff, Rich? I said, man, what do you mean? I said, it's my life. It was my life. It got me a college education. It got me money when I played in the NBA for 3 years. And so, I remember it. Most of it. I'm not going to say all of it. Some of it I'd like to forget, but you got to take the good with the bad.
Great to hear you reflecting on this, and I appreciate your time relaying some of these memories. As a senior, St. Peter's went 11-13, and in February, you set the school's all-time record for points in a game with 54 versus St. Francis, the team we just mentioned. It was a 111-89 victory, and it's a record that still stands to this day. The box score says that you were 21 of 42 from the field and 12 of 19 from the line. So you were certainly lighting it up. And you also set the record for all-time scoring average in a season at 28.6 points per game. You were the sixth leading scorer in the nation that year. As we record this, you're the eighth all-time in points scored at St. Peter's, and you still rank third in career points per game at about 21.5 points in 72 games. So how do you reflect on those very impressive accomplishments and perhaps that 54-point outing against St. Francis?
A few points disappeared over the years, so I wondered if that's political. They caught Howard Porter and Jim McDaniels signing contracts with the ABA, and they had to forfeit those games. So I don't know if you had to forfeit the points. That piqued my curiosity the last few years. But going back, I wish you didn't mention the free throws of that St. Francis game. 12 for 19. I could have done that left-handed. And I'd say 3 of them at least, maybe 4 were 1-and-1s, where if you made the first one, you get a second one. It's embarrassing, actually, 12 for 19. But the 21 for 42, I missed my first 7 shots that game.
Wow. You're 21 of 35, then we'll say.
Let's throw away the first 7. I was just warming up. But no, it was just one of them games where you just ran and shot and scored and ran and shot and scored, and you have 54 points. It was an interesting senior year. I appreciate being on this show, telling this story. My little NBA nondescript career that I had, I'm reliving this stuff. If you look way back to my freshman year, they were playing Stonehill and some of these teams, 22-2, really, okay. And then they put it all together in the NIT. All these schools wanted to give St. Peter's a whole bunch of money to come to their place, and all them cats graduated from that 22-2 team. And then it was like me and a bunch of other guys that were good players, but not as good as the 67-68 team. We'd go to Notre Dame, get our asses kicked. San Francisco, get our asses kicked. Utah State, Western Kentucky. And sure, we go to Florida for 10 days. We'd win 2 out of 3 because one of the games was against Artis Gilmore in Jacksonville, and we weren't winning that. A senior year, I scored a lot of points, averaged a lot, good enough to get drafted. Big deal was making All-American honorable mention. To me was a highlight. And the TV Guide, Sporting News, and things like that. It was fun while it lasted. It was fun while it lasted.
Well, it's fun hearing you recall it. I'm pleased to have you on the show because I love basketball history. It's fascinating to hear about the careers and the lives of players who, whilst not often in the spotlight of NBA stars for all time, your stories are just as interesting and entertaining and maybe better than the ones that you just hear repeatedly over and over. I'm really enjoying the conversation.
Thanks for saying that. It's like, I got humbled. My career was nondescript. And here I'm going, geez, Rich, you're talking about you did this in high school and you did this in the summer league and you did this in college. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, I'm your guest. Who are we going to talk about? I see you have Mahorn and Rulin on, Rick Barry, a bunch of notables. And like, wow, thanks for having me.
You're absolutely welcome. It's my pleasure. In January of your senior year, I was really fascinated that you were selected as the top pick in the 1971 Italian Pro League. And I read that aside from a tax-free salary, there are other incentives to try and lure you overseas, including a car, rent-free apartment, medical and dental coverage, etc. Given your heritage, how seriously did you entertain a move to Italy? We'll obviously get to your ABA/NBA days shortly.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. But if I knew what was going to happen 8-9 months later, I would have gone, and we'll get to that. But that was where the money was. For me, it was twice as much as I received my first contract with the Bullets. Look, I was done playing March of 71, my senior year. And I played in all these tournaments all over the place, pick up a couple $100 here and there and work on your game, get new experiences. I had 3 options. And you just read one of them, the Italian League. And the other 2 options were the ABA and the NBA. That was in January, that Italian thing came out. But I'm going to tell you a story now. And this could be the best one of them all so far. They had something called the ECAC Holiday Festival, all in Madison Square Garden, South Carolina, Western Kentucky, St. Peter's, Holy Cross, a host of other really good schools. I think 8 all in all. It was December 26th to 70, my senior year, 3 weeks after Artis Gilmore got 34 rebounds in Madison Square Garden against us and kicked our asses 152 to 106. 152 when the coach kept the starters in the whole game in Madison Square Garden.
Incredible.
So I'm shooting in the Garden. If anybody out there remembers how the Garden was when Willis Reed came out of the tunnel, right? That's where you would go into the locker room. So I'm out on the court like an hour before the game, just shooting, loosening up before layup drills. A coach named Jack McMahon, he was a Sixer coach for a number of years, assistant here. He was a lifer. And I didn't know it at the time, but he was the coach of the Pittsburgh Condors. So I'm running into the locker room. And Richie, you know, he calls him down. He says, hey, puts his hand down, shake his hand. He goes, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jack McMahon, Richie. We really like the way you play. We're thinking of drafting you and all. I said, oh, thank you, sir. So my coach was over on the bench, just observing things. That night I went out and got 39 points. We only lost by 11 to Jim McDaniels in Western Kentucky. I'm sure anybody that bet the Peacocks that night got paid with the points. We only lost by 11. The next day, the coach calls me up. He says, I don't ever want to see you talking to another pro scout again. I said, man, the guy was saying hello. What do you want me to do? My mother brought me up better than that. Okay, so Holy Cross beats us in the consolation game. 2 days later, Richie, come on upstairs. Oh, okay. I go upstairs. Now, I understand, I'm 21 years old. I have nobody to really bounce stuff off of. My dad would come to the games, but this wasn't what he did. Coach says, Rich, I want you to meet Mark Benstein. He's the owner of the Pittsburgh Condors and the ABA. I said, wait a minute, man. You told me 2 days ago you didn't want me talking to any pro scouts, so somebody's getting their palm greased here. I'm 21 years old, but you learn stuff as you go on. So he took me in the office. Here, take the office. It's all yours. He tried to get me to sign right there. He said, Rich, coach is telling me you're really pressing. You're trying too hard. And I said, no, man, I feel pretty good. He said, well, look, I want to sign you right now so all the pressure can get off you. I want to give you $25,000, $30,000, $35,000, $25,000 guaranteed. I think 2,500 signing bonus. And someone had just broken the window of my 1963 Oldsmobile Holiday sedan, broken the window that I had a duct tape together, and they took my 8-track player out with my Rare Earth and Chicago and Janis Joplin and Sly and the Family Stone, all my 8-track. I was broke. I couldn't afford $40. And here this dude is offering me this money. And he says, you better hurry up and sign this because they're going to merge at the end of the season. This is 1971. They didn't merge till 76. Okay. And I looked at him. I said, sir, I'm second leading scorer in the country right now. I'm going to take my chances. I'm going to play in the big leagues. I'm not going to have to get my check and run to the bank and hope that it clears. I'm going to the NBA. He was pissed. He was really pissed. Team folded a year later. Pittsburgh. They were playing home games in Birmingham, Alabama, and Tucson, Arizona. That's the story. So ABA, no thanks at that time. And the NBA, yeah, let's do it. So you look at the roster of that 71 team, you got all these Hall of Famers and great guards, and I was dumb enough to go for it.
I think that's great that you did knock that back, and it takes a lot of courage to look in the face of an offer like that, especially on the back of having your car items stolen and windows smashed and whatnot. To say no to that sort of money, it does speak volumes.
Yeah, but 2 days after, he said, I don't ever want to see you talking to somebody.
He gets the introduction.
Yeah, welcome to the world, Richie. Welcome to the world of dirtbags.
Very intriguing. Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. Tap the microphone icon on my website to send me a voicemail, suggest discussion topics or guests you'd like to hear conversations with. Time now to share another great review from a fan of the show. Thanks to Old Doot via Apple Podcasts in the USA. I'm quite confident that's not his real name. It's titled Love This Podcast and is rated 5 stars. It reads, only recently found this podcast a few months ago, but can't say enough about how much I enjoy listening to it. Love to hear the long-form interviews with guys that might not get that kind of exposure on many other podcasts. Great production and sound quality and great research by Adam. These interviews are great for the information they all contain. I feel like I learn more about basketball at the higher levels from every episode. Looking forward to hearing more. Thanks, Adam. Also, very sorry for your loss of your father-in-law. Well, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you, and I really do appreciate the great review. Definitely awesome to hear that feedback. Worldwide, the show has 205 ratings on Apple Podcasts, with an average of 4.9 stars, with 102 reviews across all providers. Thanks to your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode. Your ratings and reviews are one of the best ways to support the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Word-of-mouth recommendations are truly worth their weight in gold. Thanks to the sender of a text message with phone number ending in 3257. I truly appreciate the kind words and the uplifting message. I only received the last 4 digits of listeners' phone numbers and the country the message is sent from. So if you'd like to send me a message, just check the show notes and click on that link. Stay up to date with my podcast and subscribe to my free NBA history newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming episodes, future guests to appear on the show, and more. Sign up via my website or simply email me, inallairness@gmail.com. You can follow my show in various ways. Search In All Airness, 3 words, on your listening app of choice. The show is available on most platforms. Check the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with a great range of guests. Join me next time for another edition of the show.